Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm for Profit Podcast.
And listeners, welcome back to the Farm for Profit Podcast. You got Tanner here.
Corey's here.
Did you just shave?
I did.
And David's here.
So not only are you dedicated to the brand of us having different shirts on every time we record, you shaved between episodes.
I did.
That is
It's not all I shaved.
Oh, whatever.
Oh my. There's a clip for you.
If anybody thought this episode was going to be boring, clearly.
It just
We've
veered a direction I'm not sure we wanted it to go.
Yeah, we've talked about Corey's chest hair or lack thereof before. Now we're talking about how Corey's shaving habits are.
Maybe we'll have a sponsor for that kind
Man, little bit of Coryscaping.
Yeah, Corey, kind of a manscaping.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thanks, listeners. We appreciate you tuning in, hanging out with us. We're having a lot of fun here. This is probably one of the most timely recordings that we've done in a long time. The WASDE Report just came out. We're going to talk commodities here today. We're going to jump right into that. But before we do that, remember, please go out and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, and we learned on Facebook that we don't have very many of them. We got one good one. We don't have very many.
on Facebook.
On Facebook. We
Just
learned.
Facebook.
On
Who
Facebook.
uses Facebook?
Well, Dave does.
That's true.
I definitely do.
How many reviews do you have on Facebook, Dave?
I don't know. I have to look. I know there's probably more than 300.
I think
at least
the
more than
reviews
one.
on like
Yeah.
Spotify and Apple are probably the most important.
Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah.
We also like topic suggestions. You know, it was somebody's idea to go ahead and do shows right after important reports come out as far as commodities go. So we want an idea from you. If there's somebody we should talk to. Corey, somebody just called you with an idea for a show, right?
They did. Did you listen to it?
Sent me a voicemail. Got about halfway through it, and Dave
Yep.
started talking to me. So that's exciting. We love the engagement there as well. Looking forward to what November and December bring for us this year. But you guys got anything else for opening introduction before we jump into our topic today?
I always like to throw in, you can call or text us 515-207-9640. That's another way you can connect with us on a more personal level. It goes right to Tanner. He filters all those, and then he sends them on to Dave and I sometimes, and then we never respond.
And yeah, listeners,
Yes.
if you are wanting more content, of course, we've all kind of been out of the studio, and
Yep.
this is kind of back in the studio. So get prepared and buckle up because there's a lot more content coming your way.
That's right. And now we get to jump into our conversation with Andrew Kabes.
What?
Well, you said I couldn't say it's cubbish like rubbish.
It's cubbish.
Well, I know, but what am I? You gave me no other option.
I gave you all the options, just not your normal dad joke.
Oh, I've used it the other times that we've talked to him. The listeners already know who Andrew is. Thanks for joining us again, coming to us from the Lighthouse Commodities World Headquarters.
Well,
Kind of.
at least our branch headquarters.
Don't be so excited.
Well, you know, it's Friday. It's post WASDE. We came away without too much craziness, but yeah, no, it was a fun report today. I think if the biggest takeaway from today is, and per our conversation from a month ago, was, you know, are the harvest lows in? And I think you can pretty much say that's the case today with these numbers. You know, B numbers were nicely bullish, at least in the short term here. Corn keeps finding a bottom. Interestingly, too, no real adjustments in corn exports, and we've seen those screaming higher here over the last few monthly or few weekly reports. So still could be some fireworks in there, certainly. So.
Now's the time to begin taking control of your fields for the 2025 growing year.
How do you propose that we do that, Tanner?
I say reach out to Terraplex, the industry leader in agricultural spray drones.
What does that do to help?
Well, if you're looking to streamline your spraying or reduce input costs or potentially increase the precision of your application, they've got all the expertise to make that happen.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. If you're ready to elevate your farm's efficiency, visit TerraplexAg.com to learn about how their ag drones can change your operation.
I will go there right now.
Well, Corey's sitting there at lunch today, and he was pissed because we were on a podcast recording, and he missed a rally.
Yeah, I noticed right after the report, and I didn't get to see the stuff because we're, like Tanner said, recording, but I saw beans were up like 15 plus-ish, and corn was up 7 or 8 cents at one point. The board's still green, but not what it was.
Yes. I think you had some of this. I mean, if you watch this rally over the last 2 to 3, I mean, just in this last week, really, I think you were building some of this in already. And I think on a go forward, just tightening up bean carryouts versus this expectation of a 500 million bushels. Now it's not. Those are all good things. And honestly, a slow, steady move here rather than a limit higher move is probably better longer term as we look at these markets, going forward over the rest of the winter and early spring months here.
Slower, steady, upward.
So I know you talked a little bit about the report, but do you have the numbers that came out, or can you run through some of that stuff and what they mean?
Yeah, certainly. So we took, national corn yield, dropped that about 0.7 of a bushel an acre across there. Nothing super drastic there. Cut our carry out slightly because of that. As I mentioned, they didn't do anything with exports. Obviously, if you look at export pace, we're actually well above needed export pace here. So that could be something to watch in the go forward on the next few months as we, get more, get another month of sales underneath our belt. If we could clip another 100 million extra and take that out of the bottom line, then suddenly, 1.8 carry out, that's a whole lot different than 2.2, 2.3 implied at one point, during the year here. And, we found a pretty solid demand floor at $4, D's corn future equivalents, and, keep selling it. That's the name of the game here. And we've been flashing some unknown sales. Who knows where those go? I think some people, want to think that might be China. I don't know that that's the case today, but any demand is good demand at this point.
Why would unknown be China when China is typically a pretty forward purchaser?
Obviously there's times where if they want to keep their head low, I mean, that the thing about those like unknown sales, that could just be an exporter just selling FOB US grain that, could end up going out of another country. So, obviously the first thing people think of when they see unknowns, because in the big, in 2020, you saw a lot of unknown sales that turned out to all be China. So everybody wants to think that, but regardless, demand is demand. And wherever it's going, that's a good thing. So,
Corey, do you know what WASDE stands for?
No.
I was going to ask that.
No.
World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates.
So who comes up with the WASDE report?
the World Agricultural Board at the USDA.
As you say, it
So-
sounds governmental.
Is it a survey or is it based on data?
It's all data based. Obviously, they impute data from, so you've got NAS, so like National Ag Statistics Service, that would be doing the, monthly production reports and yield estimates on domestic crops. The World Ag Board takes, those into account for the U.S. numbers, and then, they're using ag attaché numbers from various countries around the world, and then putting that all into one big matrix and saying, okay, if this guy's crop is this big and this guy's crop is this big, and statistically speaking we see this kind of demand change on those numbers, that's where we would, we're going to imply that the demand is X for X, Y, and Z, and this is where these carryout numbers probably should be at. So
How old do you think the WASDE report is, Dave?
Oh, geez. I bet it goes back to the 60s.
That's almost as old as you are.
Yeah, a little bit past that. I bet it's 60 years.
No, it's actually only 44 years old. The first
Okay.
WASDE report came out in 1980.
Wow.
Now, there were reports previous to that, but the first official WASDE, the actual supply and demand estimates report, was October 14th, 1980.
So is there any little bit of phantom in there, like 20 million missing voters or anything like that?
unless we're missing like 20 bushel an acre corn crop, but I don't think that's the case.
All right, fair enough.
This year. So I didn't see that this time around. No.
I mean, you bring up a good point. This week was the election, and a new administration got voted in, the Trump administration that has been in office before. So we kind of have a knowledge of what his policies are going to be going forward. Is that going to have a big effect on trade and these commodities, you think?
Yeah, I mean, you look at, you watch election night, price moves. I mean, you have beans down 17, corn was down. I think, the market, you take the 16 election, you had similar type price action. I think the thing about this time is, like you said, this is a little bit more of a known, not quite the wild card. Most of the tariffs that were, put on during the Trump administration are still in place today, or increased during this Biden administration. And I think the one thing that you can probably take out of, the first Trump administration too was, I think tariffs were used as a tool to create behaviors from other countries that, we wanted corrected. And I think, there can always be the threat of tariffs, doesn't mean that actually happens. So, to be determined, but I think it's a tool in the toolbox. Obviously, market facilitation payments in 18 and all that fun stuff as it relates to beans. We all remember those days. And I do think probably the one thing to be said is, if it feels like the ag producer is getting left behind or is getting unfairly treated or not getting the value, I'm sure it seems like there's probably going to be some program to help right that in some respect, if, from that perspective.
So you're going to plant more beans next year?
Me?
Yeah, if there's potential for extra payments.
No, I mean, I am getting back to more of a 50-50 rotation, just logistically wise on our own farm. But if you run the numbers, there's not a whole lot of reason to grow beans compared to corn. If you can grow corn on corn decently.
Is that what you're going to try, Dave?
And no, I'm going to do corn on corn still, but for different reasons, for silage. But not to get into politics by any means, but markets, as I said, we're talking markets today, are emotion. And since the election, we're a red state, as it came out on the map, but every person that I've talked to has a more positive or bullish attitude since the election. So as we see going forward, just a lot of people have an ease about them now that they feel comfortable.
Well, the Dow was up, grain markets were up, Bitcoin was up, the dollar was up,
big.
Bonds were down.
bonds were down.
That's good for loans, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, and the Federal Reserve cut rates.
Cut 0.5%, yeah. So,
I mean, look at my Robinhood from just this week.
Yeah.
I'm up like $2,000 on my. I mean, that's kind of my
He made
spec
two,
account.
made $2,000 on $5. That's pretty good. So
That's a trader. That's a trader right there.
That's right. Is the November report more special than any other month? I mean, we get the WASDE every month, right?
Right. We get the WASDE every month. I mean, November, especially depending on harvest timing, is going to be, it's not your final one like the January one, but it's kind of going to be your big snapshot as you roll into the January. December usually is kind of a dud. That's just, let's repeat the numbers, maybe adjust exports, and we'll see in January type of thing. But yeah, so this report today, I mean, it gives you a little trend indication of where we think this yield and, final yield is going to be now. And obviously, like I said, demand piece is going to continue to be adjusted, but, now we've got a pretty good picture of the supply side. And, now we're going to start focusing on, do we finish the South American bean crop good? And then is Safrinha crop late? And, all those things. And then, we start talking about, new crop economics, 470, 480 D's corn versus, sub $11 new crop beans. And, for the, like you said, if you can raise corn on corn pretty consistently, I mean, that math looks way better on the corn side of the world today than beans do.
So Andrew, question for you. If every farmer I know wants less government oversight, and the WASDE report kind of is a pseudo government agency, correct?
It is, yeah, it's a division of the
that puts it out, and everybody I know puts trust in the WASDE report. Does government have influence on commodity prices?
I mean, I think more so in policy than reports per se. I know there's always the conspiratorial, post WASDE, negative WASDEs that USDA is out to get us, comments that you hear occasionally. But suddenly, when things are positive, those comments aren't nearly as widespread. So
fair enough.
I think that answers itself right there. So,
So interest is still higher, even though they cut rates. I mean, still higher than the last 5 years. Is that playing a factor in coming into your guys' marketing decision? I mean, I know there's a little bit of carry in the market, but not a ton.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we were talking about this week. I mean, you watch these carries narrow up versus kind of the lows here in mid-October. You got a dime carry from March to July in the corn board. That doesn't pay your interest costs. I mean, you really start to make the case here that, if you can find a decent basis bid on corn here against the March, even if it's not something you want to price, get it rolled to the July, get it delivered now. You can probably take an advance on that if you're sitting into the right place, take some money out of it, and wait for that spring summer rally. And you're going to end up in a pretty decent spot. You start moving inventory and start turning stuff into cash because you know what those operating lines look like when they're tapped out, and you don't want to look at the daily accrued interest number.
Mm-hmm. So are you guys making those suggestions to your customers right now?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we've seen, we kind of got over the hump of the worst of harvest basis, and now processors, end users, guys are starting to look at those deferred books and say, man, I need to get some coverage out there. We sold actually quite a bit of corn just this last week, and guys just getting a home made for where they need to execute on corn, and knowing that we're going to have some cash rolling out the, door here, after the first of the year, payments coming due, guys getting a good cash position as they move into the spring time frame when more bills are due and, got some inventory moving.
So for some of our operators that don't use operating notes and they're fortunate enough to do cash, is there a different recommendation for them?
I don't think so. I mean, you still have opportunity cost of grain in the bin versus grain in the bank and earning interest. I mean, it's still going to cost you to leave, at least 3%, depending where you're, and probably higher depending on where you can get high yield. So yeah, I mean, as long as it's not a tax complication of any sort, certainly there's still value in moving that stuff out of the bin. And I think sometimes guys forget that a little bit.
If you're not taking, say, your cash, like you said, Dave, you could be taking that cash and putting it to work for you, right, in the bank, in the CD, and interest in the other way.
Correct. Just judging, do you keep it in your bins in hopes that the new administration markets go up, we're back to $5 and you made a $2 improvement, or do you take it out, sell it now, put it into Dow Jones Industrial and make X? Mm-hmm. Yep. Corey, I'll ask you and Andrew both on this one. Tanner, you can chime in as well.
I got left out, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can chime in as well. How did the drier corn of this season, 2024, I know when I rode with a couple guys that we were getting 11%. So there's less drying costs this year. Did that weigh into your decision for where you're going to go with markets?
Well, I'll cop out of this because we planted full season corn. We planted too late, so we've battled it the other way. We can't get corn to dry down, so our operation might be a little unique.
So yeah, we didn't turn the dryer on our operation this year. The wettest corn we harvested was 16.5 to 17%. Went right in the bin. Could put a fan on it. It was warm enough at the time that we could dry it down to the 15 that we wanted. But a majority of our corn was harvested under 15%. Yeah, 11, 12%. That's the driest we've ever harvested. I don't think it made our decision on where we went with it, but it certainly affected our yield, right? Just in moisture alone, right?
Because we're selling weight.
15.5% is ideal. You take the moisture down to 11%, you have just physically lost weight of the kernel, right? Weight of the bushel, the opportunity to sell water. So that hurt yields. And then the agronomic factor of just a dry cob, a dry kernel is going to head shell more. You're going to lose more, have more harvest loss.
Andrew, do you think that the WASDE report takes in for that consideration that we were awfully dry?
No, it will not. And I think where you'll see that in stocks reports, and that's a whole different ballgame. Because if you look in 19, when we had extremely low test weight corn, it took a whole year to find it, but all of a sudden in late 20, in the second, third stocks report of that year, you saw that start creeping up because stocks were lower than expected, and it was a function of demand needing to use more corn to accomplish the same thing. So it's probably not as big as of an impact as test weight would be, because you can push moisture back into corn. You obviously can't make more test weight after the fact.
Right. That's hard. Still hard to do. The end user probably can, but it's a lot easier to do on beans.
Yeah, for sure. So, and then we had that same, I mean, even for the Northern Plains guys that we work with, that are almost always drying corn every year, we were taking corn out of the field at 17, sub 17, which is extremely dry for the Northern Plains guys. And, same deal, 13, 14 moistures guys finished up. So, yeah, I think you could see a little of that, but I don't think you're going to see that show up till stocks reports, probably at least second or third quarter of the year on that.
When does the acres discussion, the fight between corn, soybeans, wheat, and all that get started, or has it already started?
I mean, I think you've already seen it start. I think after today's report, it probably becomes a little more prevalent, just because now you're back to 470, and now you're like, well, this bean number, although it feels comfortable, is getting to the point where we can't just give away every bean acre to corn next year, and you got to start watching those spreads a little bit, and especially just the corn bean spread and ratios, that'll be pretty telling. But I think the market's still gonna, the thing we got to remember, we're back into this 6 month. We still can't forget about the South American crop. That although we dropped U.S. carryout and world carryout dropped commensurately, even though we had a slow start in Brazil this year, things have nominalized and look pretty good for right now. And this first bean crop down there actually is in pretty decent shape today. So man, they go flip off a record or near record crop again. Suddenly world stocks are back up, and this bean thing just kind of stays ho hum for a little bit here.
So that's where it sits right now. Is it's average or above average based upon what they've been getting for weather?
Yeah, I mean, we had that concern there as we rallied that first time in mid-October, early October, dry, kind of a repeat of a year ago. But then, mid-October, they started getting some really plentiful rains, and crop has gotten back in good time. Not that exceptionally late versus normal. So obviously, like all growing crops, there's still a weather component to it, but just getting the crop in the ground is the first battle, and that battle is basically over with now.
Because what's that growing season look like? We got it planted the last 45 days. We're looking at...
Yeah, they'll start taking that new crop off late January, early February. So that's the other thing, is you kind of start watching this demand piece on the export side. We've been a little behind. We keep getting some, obviously the big China in the room business through the first of the year. A lot of things as administration changes, what's the rhetoric around that? Certainly their preference has been for Brazilian, the Chinese has been for Brazilian beans this last 12 months. And so would expect that to be very similar unless we see some pretty major issues in that crop or delays further.
What are you looking at there?
No, I'm just thinking about South America and how we've just become a second fiddle, really. I mean, they produce more than we do. And
we've got a podcast that's going to come out a couple weeks after this show, and we got to interview a gal
from Argentina.
Mm-hmm. that was here telling us that she came to learn about how American farmers do it with scale and the equipment that we have, and how they're always looking towards what American farmers are doing to better their operations. And we almost didn't let her go home.
But remember, her yields were less than ours, considerably.
Well,
I think bean yields down there can be fairly consistent, obviously. And if I'm not incorrect, and I've lost track of some of this, I mean, I think Argentina still doesn't allow GMO corn seed, if I remember correctly. So there is some yield drag there.
Their advantage is access to ground. They got cheaper ground. Yeah. They got more ground they can develop, and they can get 3 crops a year in a lot of places, right? Or 2 or 3 or whatever. They can double crop. They always have something growing.
I thought
some sugar cane and some soybeans.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. So cool. What else? What's our next thing that we should be looking at report wise for marketing?
Yeah, like Jan WASDE coming up, and I think the other thing too, we not to get back onto the political spectrum, but this whole biofuels, advanced biofuels, renewable diesel, SAF. We've had huge processor growth around that. We've been implying a lot of growth in the bean oil and oil seeds balance sheets to feed that need, kind of ethanol 2.0, but on the oilseeds side of the world. And I think we need to keep an eye on, what the rhetoric around 45Z is coming out, in January. A lot of that was, done through the Inflation Reduction Act. Do we continue with that? Are those, mandates going to get funded to the full extent?
That's where we interviewed
that's a
Continue Mag on that with carbon credits, that 45Z.
Yep, carbon intensity score.
Yep.
That'll be interesting to see because that's really wasn't slated to come out until like Q2, I think, next year, 2025.
Well, I think payments are still going out in 2025, but they just haven't figured out.
IRS has not ruled on anything in the pathway and how they're going to even do it. So now you got a new administration that takes a little different bend on ethanol, biofuels, carbon scoring, and IRS that really hasn't ruled on anything. And I think there's going to be a lot of question marks out there, at least through the end of the year and first part next year.
So they lowered corn yields slightly, but I have seen a lot of emergency corn piles in a lot of places. And how is that going to affect, or what's the basis outlook going forward?
Well, I think, just like you talked earlier, everything was dry. Everything came off so fast. We saw the same thing in the Northern Plains, a crop that would normally take, 30 to 45 days to take off. We had beans and most of the corn crop off in North Dakota in the month of October, which is almost unheard of. And same thing up there, just logistics, transportation, nothing could stay caught up just with the massive yields and the amount of grain. Again, you're seeing the farmer, the strength of the farmer is actually showing again with these big yields, slamming the door shut on the bins and saying I really don't want to participate at sub 425 cash corn. And you've got North Central Iowa hog mills paying 40 over today for corn. So it's pretty indicative that honestly, if the board stagnates and stays here, you probably just keep seeing better basis values, i.e. the comment from earlier of you see some pretty historically strong basis values. It's probably not a bad thing to get those locked up, start shipping on it, roll it out to the July, and give yourself till the spring rally to price it, and you're probably not going to be sitting in too bad of a spot, because the day the board rallies another 50 cents, just like we saw late in this last crop year, basis is just going to fall apart pretty much.
Tanner, you still have crop in the field, so that must just 3 letters. We need to get you a shirt that says BTO.
It's free storage.
Very good.
Yeah, free storage, better than 6 cents a month.
Yeah, free dry down.
I need to find out where this feed mill is that's paying 40 cents.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got your
on air.
You got your truck started there?
We'll meet up after the combo. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, nominally, I think, and especially like this year, as we all well know, Northern Iowa, Northwest Iowa is going to see some pretty intense, changes with the demand profile up there, and some of the relatively poorer crop in the nation relative to expectations with their early flooding and stuff.
And that's the job of basis, right? Like it should be higher and pull grain from a further distance.
Yeah, I know there's corn shipping out of the Dakotas into various parts of Northern Iowa right now to feed that demand.
And isn't Iowa like a net importer anyway, even on a good year of corn?
I think you're technically like even-ish, but yeah, I think depending on the timing, obviously it feels like a net importer a lot of years.
Yeah.
So Andrew, what tools do our farmers need to be looking at right now that you have that you could give out as a tech tip if everybody's trying to make decisions on marketing right now? So what tools you got?
I think just again, find a trusted source that has had good recommendations in the past. I think find some expectations where you want to have good open orders at that. Maybe it's not 450, 470 corn. Maybe it's temper those expectations a little bit. Tools wise, I know we've talked earlier. We have our Hedge Beacon internal product. There's some similar type cell signal type products out there for various different groups, and just figure out what it costs you to raise the crop this year. and, look at it and say, hey, I need this and this. And if that's within the, not $7 corn, then, set some targets, stick to them, and just be disciplined about it.
Farmers protect what matters most with Sukup Manufacturing. Proudly family-owned and made right here in the USA, Sukup is your go-to innovator for grain bins, dryers, and other grain storage solutions designed to keep your hard work safe. Corey, how did your bin site run this fall?
Flawlessly. Our fall was fast and furious. We didn't have to dry any corn, so I didn't have to use my mixed flow dryer for drying. But I did use it to meter out grain into my air system because we don't have a leg. So that worked great. All the electronics worked great. The bins worked fantastic. The fans worked great. And we're getting ready to actually haul some out to core our bins and use our drag system from Sukup.
Hey, there you go. With Sukup's unmatched quality and support, you get peace of mind just like Corey to make sure your grain stays protected. Sukup leads the way with reliability and performance. Visit sukup.com today.
Guys, we need to start like the secret list, the farm for profit list. And it's the secret list where like the best basis is, and we'll just put it out. We are the tool. Farm for profit.
Yeah, you
secret
are the
list.
tool.
You got to subscribe.
Dave's got the biggest tool.
This is the premium service. It only costs you $10 a month.
How has the hedge beacon performance been this fall?
It's done really well. I mean, we've every time we've put these mini rallies on this fall, we've been up. Like we rolled in today's report as a near sell signal on corn and beans, and feel like we've done. It's done well for what we've been asking of it. So
good. Well, let's say till the end of the year, you got one thing. What would you tell guys to be doing with their grain in the bins?
I think, like I said earlier, look for these good basis opportunities, an opportunity to get stuff set, get a home for stuff. Maybe if the end user allows you to get stuff rolled out, roll it out versus further month at a decent spread, and either take your gain, take your advance on it, but look for these opportunities, because what basis is telling us is nobody else is interested in selling corn today at these levels, so you should be, and wait for that board to come around and take advantage of that higher board after that grain shipped.
I did look it up. Average soybean bushels per acre in Brazil are 50 bushel to the acre.
Okay.
So maybe not quite as high as.
I mean, what was our estimate today for WASDE for US?
51.7.
So we're not
that far off.
crazy.
Yeah. Well, you are crazy. Just
Nah.
not about that. But no, I remember the last time we had a full show with you, we kept talking about what do producers do that don't have as much grain sold as they want to. And I don't know if we've gotten very many comments back that said that we were wrong.
Right.
Do you still feel like sitting in this studio that the sentiment is still guys wish they'd sold more? And are they just saying that because they could have had a good price if they'd have pre-sold February or July?
I mean, I wish I would have sold last year for this time. $5 type stuff, but $5+. Yeah, why not? But yeah, I still feel that way, I guess.
And is this still a rumor? If it's piled outside, it has to be sold? Like a co-op can't put it in a pile on the ground unless it's been sold?
I don't know about that.
Not in Nebraska, I know.
Okay.
I mean, it's just emergency temp storage. I don't know if there's different rules. I mean, every grain regulator does things differently, so.
Yeah, obviously it was a coffee shop, but I heard that based upon the fact that if you didn't have your bushels sold and wanted to come pick it up, that they run the risk of it being out of condition, being stored outside.
Maybe.
Well,
yeah.
it's covered.
No, not
Somewhere.
necessarily. Some of them are not. Yep. And then if you piled it on the ground, like an emergency ground pile, like they weren't planning on it, they have to file for a permit to get it done there, and like you have ground moisture that could come up. And the days that the co-ops are flooding the ethanol plants with their ground piles and cleaning them up, I get docked for, some musty smell or a high moisture or something, and these guys are rolling in, and I'm talking chunks of just rotten corn are coming in and sitting on top of the grates, and I'm like, I wonder how much they're getting docked. Probably not at all.
We haven't talked much about wheat. When I think about dockage, I know my family hasn't raised any wheat, but there's a lot of different things that go into the quality of wheat production and dockages that happen there. How is the winter wheat crop looking? Do we get seeded on time since it was dry, or is dry creating issues?
Yeah. Domestically, winter wheat crop got seeded in decent shape. They've had now, just in the last 2 weeks, really good moisture across the major wheat growing regions. So certainly that crop should be in decent shape. There's been some concern about the Russian crop, which obviously is the big dog in the winter wheat world. In this day and age, they were extremely dry this fall during seeding. They have picked up some moisture, but that's why you've seen, we're back to about where we were 30 days ago in the wheat market. But, we're still historically tight overall in the world wheat carryout. And that's something that, watching in the spring. It's still not something that, Corey's going to go decide that he wants to go plant spring wheat on his farm this spring in Iowa per se. But to the extent that, I think, there's going to, if wheat rallies, it's usually a pretty good sign for corn to want to rally alongside with it or tag along, as they're replaceable across the globe as feed wheat or feed grains. And, so a tight wheat balance sheet, a tightening corn balance sheet, safrinha crop that isn't in the bin yet. Certainly not a recipe for $7 corn right now, but certainly you've got the recipe for way better potential for the upside longer term here than, back sub $4 corn anytime soon.
Man, we got to clip that. That's good news.
That is good news. I'm going to hold you to that.
I mean, 455, right? That's
you did say 470. The only 470 on the board is July of 27.
Yeah. I think that's attainable today.
Let's see. December 25 corn right now is for teetering just under 450, 447.
Corey, you made a comment about selling. You should have sold a year ago. How many people, I just realized this the other day when I went and talked with the co-op, they said that most of the people this year had actually pre-sold at least half of their stuff. How many guys out there, I did not know this, how many guys out there are selling years in advance?
Lots, but I would also say that most of the guys sold a year in advance. I doubt it.
Okay.
Maybe if they did, is a little bit.
Most of the guys had something sold,
maybe,
but not 50% of the crop.
Gotcha. How many years in advance do most people go?
What do you think, Andrew, when you look at your portfolio?
I mean, you were just talking
and
27.
You meet clients.
So you're talking
Yeah, I mean, even in our client deck, I mean, once we came out of that May rally, we were probably 60 to 70% hedged on what we thought was going to be an APH crop. Obviously, we're a little behind because of the better yields. Great, wonderful. I would say this year you are actually even further behind as a national average than the year prior. That seems to be the problem when you have hangovers from high price years. It's the perpetual, well, I think it's going to go a little higher. Let me wait another 50 cents and then we don't pull the trigger. I don't disagree that there was probably a lot of guys with some pre-contracted grain on, but as a percentage of their total farm handle, maybe 20% would be my guess, just overall. I will say the farmer has become more sophisticated marketer in the last 5 to 10 years to some extent. Kind of has to be with the margin structures we have. But, that's, you look at just our group of guys and generally speaking, 9 out of 10 years, those forward sales in the spring of the year, you look back and say, gosh, yeah, glad we did what we did.
And I would say in those years that I'm going to call this last year like a slow bleed, right? Like it just keeps going down, never feels like it's going back up. And when we were looking, when it was 2023, spring of 23, and we were looking at fall of 24, like I'm pretty sure it was lower, right? So you were looking at $6 corn that you could sell now, and next year out of the field's $5 or $5.25.
$5.50.
Yeah, whatever.
And
it's like,
why would I? Yeah,
it's a mentality thing.
Cheaper.
Yeah, and so that's just very tough, and that's probably why we're behind.
Gotcha.
So I will go a year to 2 years out. So I have corn and soybeans sold for 2025 crop, and I had offers for 26 that never hit. So that's my extent. I mean, you got to have some cojones, that you're going to still be farming in 2-3 years out, right? Depends on what kind of position you're in.
All you gotta do is show the banker that you got corn sold for 26, and he's got to give you the operating
Yeah,
line for that.
that's how it works.
I guess,
That's
yeah.
how that works.
No comment.
You'd be losing money if you didn't re-sign me.
Losing money
If you did. No. Well, Andrew, we appreciate you taking the time here. It's always nice to get right after these reports, get your insight right away. But before we wrap up, what do you want to tell our listeners, kind of as a reminder about what you guys can do to help them, or what things they should be considering here before the calendar year ticks over to the next one?
Yeah, certainly Lighthouse Commodities, we're able to help anybody that, looking for advice on stuff, via our hedge beacon product, and just generally if somebody wants to give us a ring or look us up online, lighthousecommodities.com. But yeah, just, we're not in a runaway bullish market here before the end of the year. Reasonable targets on prices, things that are profitable, singles and doubles are going to win the game for the next 12 months. And, just as much as we all want to be runaway bullish as producers, we're not in that cycle right now of that. And so, you get another 10, 20, 30 cents on this board, and you probably want to participate and not be waiting for that magical 5, because, 489 still pays the bills pretty well, even then. So.
Do you think, I just thought of one more question, guys, the Farm Bill. So there was prelude to the Farm Bill. I did not read through it, but I saw that Tractor Zoom was talking about what equipment prices would do if the Farm Bill came to fruition. Has anybody here looked at the Farm Bill, and what's that going to do to grain prices?
My observation is it's not close to being released yet. There's still too big a differences between Democrats and Republicans. But there are some overarching things that may provide extra incentives or confidence, maybe extra confidence for growers. What do you think, Andrew? Have you paid much attention?
Yeah, I haven't really paid much attention. Obviously we're mired in now we'll be a lame duck, session here until after the 1st. Who knows what the new, group of senators and representatives are going to do after January.
And the Ag Committee loses 2 spots, or 2 spots are going to switch out as well due to not getting
although
reelected.
I think it was, and I can't remember the representative from Mississippi, I believe it was, if you saw, they'd introduced basically that stopgap. Basically, whatever you planted this year, here's some indemnity payments, not based on ARC PLC, but just on planted acres for 24 that I guess, quite frankly, look pretty lucrative if you put anything in the ground whatsoever. So, $100 an acre on corn was projection. I think 80 on beans.
Yeah, that's what I was hearing.
Yeah, it was, hey, we couldn't figure it out for the actual Farm Bill, but here's some money to throw at you for a little bit to keep everybody happy for another 6 months, I guess. So.
Wow. Well, again, it's been our pleasure having you on, making sure we get our listeners some of the latest information. And listeners, make sure you subscribe to Farm for Profit Premium, so that way you can find out where this 40 over basis is.
We have a premium account?
Well, we're going to after we find out where all the hot markets
We
go.
do
And
now.
put our listen. You also learn about what else Corey shaves. Okay, maybe we don't have a Farm for Profit Premium.
That's the ultra premium.
that's the
Only fan.
That's platinum. That's platinum. Absolutely. But no, thank you so much. We appreciate you hanging out with us, taking some time here out of your afternoon. And listeners, we thank you for listening too. So don't be afraid to share your ideas with us. But until next time, have a good one.